Welcome to Strip Coverlet, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I am Adrian Ford, and we are here for what I believe is the ninth in a 52-ish part series as we journey short story by short story through the Finca Vigia edition, the complete short stories of Ernest Hemingway. The short story in question today, The End of Something. Now, I have not read this short story itself, probably a decade, I would say. And I did not remember it. And there are many myriad reasons, I think you could say, why I don't remember it. But upon a second reading with more and deeper considerations, there's something going on here. So, there's three parts to this video: a So What Happened portion where we recap the short story, a lit crit where we talk about some of the stuff worth talking about on a literary level with this short story, and I have only one writer's corner note. Although number one the number one point in the lit crit section should be paid attention to by writers as well, as it's something that maybe we only see from Hemingway. It is something that dastardly. So, what happened in The End of Something? Horton's Bay had a lumber boom and then a collapse, as all the lumber had been cut and the lumber mill was picked up and left. That was some time ago. As Nick and Marjorie are rowing along the shore, Marjorie asks him, "Do you remember the place?" And Nick says, "I just remember it." They are trout fishing, but not having any luck. So Nick rows the boat to shore, and the two use buckets to catch perch, behead, and skin them, and then they set lines. The whole time, Nick has been short with her. Finally, she asks him what's wrong, and he says he doesn't know. Fair enough. Marjorie sets up camp, basically, has some sandwiches and whatnot, and Nick builds a fire. The two then sit in silence for a while before Marjorie starts up again and asks him what's wrong. And again, he says nothing. And then she says, "Come on, what's wrong?" And he says, "Nothing is fun." She says, "Isn't love fun?" And he says, "No," again. So she says, "I'm taking the boat. You can walk back." She goes, gets the boat, and leaves, and Nick sits in silence for a while until that silence is broken by Bill, who asks how she took it. This was premeditated. Nick says to leave him alone. That is the So What Happened. That's what happened in the short story. But remember, in that recap, I said Nick was being short with her. Do you remember where we got the first notification that Nick was being short with her? It's something that probably struck you on a very subliminal level. And if it didn't, allow me to clue you in. Hemingway is often criticized for the masculinity of his characters. Oftentimes they're brusque. They are drinkers. They're hard drinkers. They're cursers. They're violent. They are all of these things that are sort of hyper masculine or stereotypically masculine, things like that. They are a facade of masculinity. But I really do think this, by the way. I'm not just getting on the feminists here. I really do think that part of the hatred for the masculinity in Hemingway is that it's very real. And because it's so real and so slick, so subliminal, we're not really sure sometimes where to look in the short story to pinpoint why these characters seem so standoffish. And I have said for a long time, they Well, Hemingway writes these female characters who are weak and these male characters who run them over, and it's just such a sexist way to write things. Well, do you really feel that way in this short story? Nick is kind of a jerk, but she takes the boat and she tells him, "You can walk." And he says, "Well, yes, ma'am, I'll even push the boat off for you." Right? And we can say, well, he was mean and she didn't deserve this. We don't know the ins and outs of that relationship. I dare conject. I dare put out there into the Weasley winds of the universe. If the genders here were reversed and it were Nick on the receiving end of this breakup, the feminists wouldn't have a problem with that. And the only reason I'm saying the feminists is because that was my experience in college. All of my professors wanted us to write feminist interpretations of short stories, etc. So that's the only reason I'm harping on it right now. But Marjorie seems to be a fairly strong character here. She tells Nick what's going to happen after he breaks her heart. Now, in this short story, there is a very masculine thing. And what I mean is, this is something that men do. And I think a lot of times we don't realize we're doing it. And this is something that if you are on the receiving end of this treatment and you don't recognize it, you're going to wonder why that guy got so mad so fast. Okay? I'm going to spill the beans. I'm going to give it to you. And this might, for some of us, explain why you don't get along with your dad. This might explain why you and your boyfriend have such a hard time. "It seems more like a castle," Marjorie said. Nick said nothing. They rode out on of sight of the mill, following the shoreline. Then Nick cut across the bay. "They aren't striking," he said. "When you say something playful to a man who is not in the mood to talk, he will just ignore you. This is not an invitation to say it again. This is not an invitation to change the subject. This is not an invitation to ask him what's wrong. This means cool it for a little bit, will you?" Now, there's all sorts of things that you can ignore someone when they say. But when someone says something playful, like, "It seems more like a castle," and a man ignores it, it means shut up for a little bit. I'm trying not to talk to people. I know. You can say whatever you want about it. You can say it shouldn't be that way. You can say it's a prickish move. I promise you've been in that situation. Because if the guy's all right talking, and you say something playful like "it seems like a castle," he'll say, "Oh yeah, those could be the turrets up there. Is this the moat, then?" There will be some level of engagement. If the guy's not particularly keen or he's just not very bright, maybe he'll just laugh along with you. Maybe he'll agree. But if there is silence, maybe shut up. So I think it would be very easy, because this is a very short story. Probably this is flash fiction or thereabout. I don't have an exact word count on it. It would be very easy to say, "Yeah, this is a so what story." Yeah, so what? There's no real literary stuff going on. It's just a guy taking a girl out and breaking up with her. Okay, but what's the setting? Where are we here? Nick has taken Marjorie. Marjorie seems to love to fish. Marjorie seems to love, maybe, whatever it is that Nick loves. Marjorie just wants to be there with him. Marjorie seems in love with Nick, seems fairly heartbroken when he doesn't send her off. He says it's not fun anymore. She sends herself off. She makes that decision. Nick has taken her. He rode to the ruins. Now, not just any ruins, lumber mill ruins. This was a hard, fast town. This was a very lumber mills, very masculine, very manly, very rough, very tough, very tumble. This was a manly place. It is now desolate. The man is gone. The humanity is gone from the manly place. Nick has taken her to the place that used to be full of manliness and worth. Now it is empty and desolate. The setting represents Nick. Nick is empty and desolate in this story. Whatever the reason is that he's breaking up with Marjorie, he does not feel great about it. Right? Bill comes around afterwards and says, "Hey, how'd you take it?" And he says, "Get lost." The place Nick took her to break up with her is a symbol for how he feels. Empty and desolate where manly bustle once had been. Now, the second thing worth talking about on a literary scale here, what are they doing? Nick took her to the empty, manly place, desolate, where worth had once been, and they set out fishing lines. Plenty of fish in the sea. There's plenty of fish out there. Nothing is biting. Nick has taken her to the empty spot, the desolate place, the depressed place, the place where everything good has been used up. He takes her to that place to fish, and there are no fish biting. That is literature. Pardon me. This feels very much like it could be a so what story. Not terribly much going on. Maybe it's 1,000 words. A guy takes a girl out to break up with her, and then his buddy shows up, and the guy says, "Get lost, scram, kick rocks." That's it. But where did it happen? And what were they doing? His lines are still in the water. Still, nothing is biting. Nick is fallow. The one real writer's note that I have here, pretend the short story wasn't called The End of Something. Pretend the short story was called Nick and Marjorie's Day Out, right? Just pretend. The title gives everything away, but pretend it was just something so simple as Nick's night on the river. Nick and Bill in the aftermath of Marjorie, whatever you want to call it. Is there something going on between Bill and Nick? There's an interpretation to be had there. But this opening, in the old days, Horton's Bay was a lumber town. That's all you need. That's all you need, and we already know what the short story is about. In the old days, that means something has changed. That means that whatever we're getting into in this short story, it is not what had been happening. So once Nick and Marjorie are introduced, we have some reason to believe they will leave separately. In the old days, Horton's Bay was a lumbering town. Right there. We know this short story is about change. That's how fast Hemingway gets us into the subliminal action of this short story. That's how fast Hemingway sets theme. That's how fast Ernest Hemingway sets expectation for this short story. In the old days, it's a cliche. In the old days, if you wrote this and handed it in to me in a writer's group, I would strike it out. But it does so much work in this short story. In the old days, it's a cliche, but it tells us right up front that everything is changing. It tells us right up front nothing is going to be the same. It tells us right up front that whatever we're going to get in the next 1,000-ish words, it is not what these characters have come to know. That's all I have for this short story. There is poetry on the channel every Monday. We are about to finish up a read through of Dubliners. We are in this read along for Ernest Hemingway. There's a read along for Sylvia Plath on the channel right now. Bukowski on the weekends. Weekends with Buck. Weekends with Chucky Buck. So if you were into those sorts of things, hitting the like button really does help me out on the channel, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, consider hitting the subscribe button in order to stick around for more, because hey, I hope to have you back for the next video.